right, y'all. Welcome to the Starchildjr. Stuffs and Things podcast. This is the interview series, and today I got a special guest with me. I got my uncle Doug Wimbish on here with me today. What's up, Doug?
That's all good. What's up, nephew?
Oh man, nothing to me, man. Nothing to me. Just trying to deal with the cabin fever. You know what I mean?
hmm
I got this little podcast going on. That way I have something to keep myself occupied. And I found a way to keep the people entertained while I couldn't be on the stage. You know what I mean?
Well done, my brother. Well
Yeah.
done. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you joining me today, man. I appreciate it. I hope everything is well your way and you staying healthy and happy and safe.
Yeah, so far so good. Adjusting to the new normal and seeing your face puts a smile on my face.
Oh man, you too kind. You too kind, man. You too kind. So check it out, guys. So for those of you guys who don't know, first and foremost, get out from under that rock because this is Doug Wimbish, man. This is the man. Man, so Doug has played with everyone, man, from the Sugar Hill Gang, Living Color, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, Tackhead, Billy Idol, Depeche Mode, Mick Jagger, Annie Lennox. Man, this dude has a resume that is it just goes back decades, man. And and then I come to find out also just so happened to have crossed paths with the P-Funk gang, like most musicians from that era have found their way. You know what I'm saying? So I tell you what, before we get into your extensive history, let's start with the pleasantries, man. You know what I'm saying? I found out at NAM that you were closer family to me than I even realized, man. Let's talk about that. The Atlanta days.
Oh, well, I could lead into it or I could start right there. A few episodes. Let's see. I became a Funkadelic fan in 1970.
Okay.
Time I first heard Mommy, what's a Funkadelic? And it just opened my whole mind up. Mind you, that's coming off the heels of Jimmy's death and all those that paved the road before Sly and Miles and everybody that was
Right.
a part of just making us who we are and how we get our groove on right now. Um, but hearing Funkadelic really opened my mind up to like just freedom.
That was
And
the whole message and the whole thing, man. Just free your mind and your ass will
will
follow.
follow. And the fact that you had a person like George that was able to assemble, just starting from the parliaments and all that he did with the doo-wop, with that doo-wop group to Motown to all those movements to like, boom, now he's at Westbound Records and here comes Funkadelic. And I'll never forget seeing that album cover and just like reading the liner notes and seeing all the faces. So that's where it began. Um,
It was spooky.
Following that journey, a couple of key highlights. What were they? Well, getting into all the records, understanding what, Bernie and Tiki and, Eddie Hazel, Billy Bass, and all the, Fuzzy, Ray, Calvin, the whole crew, understanding the characters, it was always a journey, man. Because every time I would see the albums, it was like getting a updated history lesson of what's going on right now in the path to go. Where I want to follow. I want to go there.
Right on.
That's a good direction. So, a couple of highlights took place in that enlightening. One of which was there was an event that I finally got a chance to see P Funk at, and it was in Randall's Island in New York City, and that was an event that was legendary. First of all, the event was sold out. It was rammed to the gills. On the bill was Buddy Miles and Rare Earth and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, P Funk was kind of on early. And thank God they were because it was so jammed up in that place, man. It was it was insane. bands couldn't even get their gear from the truck to the stage.
Yeah.
A lot of craziness was going on. So I first saw that. I got a scar I got a scar for life to remind me of that gig. You know, there was a lot of kind of like it's kind of like rushes going on, and people would start to kind of like go a little bananas, and I was sitting on these cement steps, slipped and kind of sliced my wrist up. So that's the memory from that's
You
a
got a
memory
you got a
from the
battle
gig.
scar.
Battle scar. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I saw that and I was like, man, that was just it was so crazy because the atmosphere was insane. Perfect summer day, and I got a chance to see my heroes. So then that's that phase. Phase two, um, here I am, like I guess about 1973, 74, about 74, going into 75. I got a chance to go see the band up in at a place called the Sugar Shack in Boston.
Yeah.
And that was another great gig. Now I'm at a club, and they were debuting what was going to be the release of Parliament's Chocolate City,
Okay.
that and I guess coming out a few months later. So I'll never forget, they came out the dressing room chanting "Ride On." They sang their way to the stage, singing
Yeah.
that groove, and they went right on and went right into playing "Ride On." I
Baby,
was
do the ride on.
like,
Mama, do the ride
that's
on. That's dope.
fantastic. So anyway, that just these highlights. Then just moving over to some of the eras in a few of the years. I'll fast forward now to kind of like another highlight. Now here I am, 1979. The same rhythm section, Keith LeBlanc and Skip McDonald that I've been working with. Well, mainly Skip. He's my mentor. We were now fast forward and transplanted into now back to what was Sugar Hill Records, and so I'm back at a label that I was already familiar with Wood Brass and Steel, and the band that I was signed to that label with Skip. And anyway, now Rapper's Delight is cut. Sylvia Robinson's calling my house. Doug, I need you to come down, and please come down to the studio. And so I'm like, all right. So I ended up, and it's funny because I'm not on Rapper's Delight, but I heard Rapper's Delight because she had been calling my house. She wanted to Skip and I to cut it.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm at this club we're playing now called Leo's Welfare Disco. Let me,
Leo's Welfare Disco.
can't script this. So I'm there and I hear Rapper's Delight come on, and within 8 bars, I'm like, that's an all platinum record because you could tell the sound of the studio. So anyway, I'm
Uh-huh.
like, okay. So I call Sylvia. She's like, Doug, I got something hotter than hotcakes. I've been looking for y'all. Need you and Skip. Can you come down? So we came down. So anyway, now we're here. We are back at I'm back at what is now Sugar Hill Records, which was all platinum records prior, and it's all the same, just same owners, just transition with a new name.
Okay.
Now we're there doing a couple of groups. We started doing a couple of shows with the Sugar Hill Gang. Started recording some records. Sugar Hill Groove with Tito Puente on percussion, and a couple of rare things. And we went down south and did a show in Columbia, South Carolina. We met the Sequence. They were
Okay.
outside, they were outside the venue. We're playing at the Columbia Civic Center or Coliseum, and next thing you know, who's these girls? And Joey comes there. Joey Jr., Sylvia's son, and he's like, Doug, man, you gotta come here quick. Mommy needs you. Bring your bass. And then it's like, basically, Sylvia's like, Sylvia, girls, play something for Doug.
Uh-huh.
And then I have my bass, and they had already done a couple of raps for Sylvia, and they were like, let's do something new. They did Funk You Up,
Okay.
and then I just kind of wrote itself right at the audition. They started singing Funk You Up. I started playing it, the bass, and back in those days, everybody's around. It's a mob, So
Right.
Sylvia's like, Doug, what do you think? I like to bring him up. If I said, yeah, let's do. I think that's a good. Let's make it happen. She said, if I do, I need you to look after these girls. They're from Columbia, South Carolina. They're not going to know what's going on.
That
So
green is
Craig
a braid of
calls,
grass.
yeah, and Sylvia. I mean, and Skip McDonald. So basically they came up. We cut Funk You Up.
So that's
And
you
then,
on that record too.
yeah, that's me on that record. Skip and Keith.
Okay.
And anyway, and Craig Derry on singing and playing percussion. So now fast forward during this and it's funny because it all happened real quick. I mean, like it's like we're from in September of 1979. We went back there, did a gig with the Sugar Hill Gang at Harlem World, which was bananas. It's like playing
Uh,
with the Beatles. It's just we only could play like half a Rapper's Delight, and then the whole place got shut down. So
uh,
anyway, now sequence. Rapper's Delight is blowing up bigger than toilet tissue. There, everybody's playing it. Butterball in Philadelphia and Jim Gates in East St. Louis, and Sylvia and Joe and Sylvia had their network of DJs that they could actually get it to. Frankie Crockett had to tighten them up to play it.
right.
So anyway, now it's getting it's obviously punched this. It's punching clouds now. So now Sylvia got a call. She was with Norby Walters. She got a call from Karen Kirkendale. Karen and them were the ones that were doing that had the P-Funk tour on at the
Okay.
time. So the Knee Deep tour was already in progress, and George had an ear, heard. He's like, I want Sugar Hill Gang to open up.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, nephew, that was like a dream come true. When Sylvia told me that, because she knew of George, of course, but she was like, yeah, you guys we're gonna got an offer to do this tour. We're like, who? Dr. Funkenstein. You know what I mean? She was like, who? Yeah, you talking about Parliament-Funkadelic? Yeah, them. Yeah. So anyway, that was like, man, you got to be kidding me. So fast forward, Sugar Hill Gang gets to open up for Parliament-Funkadelic. October 31st, 1979, first gig was in Nashville.
Halloween.
So we roll up. We had a friend of ours had an old Silver Eagle bus that the
Uh-huh.
Stones had used back in the day, but it was old. You know what I mean? So we rolled up drove in from New Jersey to Nashville. Man, we rolled up to that gig and we took our gear out the bay of the of the bus. People looking at us like, "Who these country boys?" Like, first person I see when I walk in is Dennis Chambers. He's sitting on a road case playing bass,
Okay.
right? And then I see Bernie and the Brides and your pops, Gary, and Ray's there. It's funny. So Ray, so I started seeing the whole crew. I'm a fan. So then we go on stage and sound check. Man, we had this little gear. They were like, "Nah, man, y'all use our gear, they let us use our gear the first night, and then because I think honestly, cats might have been so into their orbit, and hip hop had just Rappers Delight just came out so quick.
Right.
A lot of people may not have even known in the crew what was going on because you're in your own bubble. You're
Right.
in your own world. You might have heard about it. You might know if you're in DC, you know all the go-go stuff and everything, trouble funk. But hip hop may not have caught up to everybody, right?
Right.
And I think cats were like, yeah, I heard about them boys. So we went on stage and hit it. And it was like, nobody knew what to expect because they're like, we're not coming heavy-handed first. You got three rappers. And so, man, Rappers Delight was a big song. So soon we do an intro and then blah. Go right into Rappers Delight and there'll just be mass pandemonium and people are singing all the lyrics and all the guys in P-Funk are looking around going, wow.
What's up with this?
So anyway, so now we're on tour and then, we're hanging out and I get to meet your pops, who was always nice, man. Gaz was always cool, man. He embraced
Yeah.
us. On this tour, George was doing just a few spot dates. So your pops was the one that was really heading it up. George would come out Chicago, maybe Atlanta, and all the real proper, cities that, that he needed to be at. But he was getting other projects together. So
Yeah.
anyways, Gary was always cool, man. He'd come and check us out and, and come on, man, hang out backstage with us. And I go hang out and, because it was like, there was really, in those days, there was two events. There was what was going on stage and what was going on backstage. And there might have even had a bus or two or three that had all kinds of activities going on. It was live.
Right.
and you know, so we hit it off. And then fast forward after that tour ended, um, because you were born, you must have been born in '78.
Yes, sir.
Yep. You were about a year when we rolled up. You were a year old. I remember when you were. I remember meeting you the first time when you were. I sorry to put you on blast, but you were a year old. You know, and in Atlanta, spent a couple days when we were in Atlanta. We took a couple days off, and you know, pops had you there, and you know,
Uh-huh.
Linda and everything. So it was just like that's when I first felt really, you know, like just your pops was one to help bring it all together because he's always social, always cool, as was the band. You know, I hooked up with Dennis, and you know, we ended up, you know, Dennis bought Dennis and Sugar Hill Records and stuff to do some stuff there. But George, I, it's funny because in Chicago, one of the last dates of that tour, what's the we're the band, all the band from P Funk is staying at I don't know, another hotel, and then we're staying at one of the old Roberts Inn.
Uh-huh.
Roberts Inn is an old iconic in Chicago hotel. There was two of them, and we were staying in the one that was the Roberts Inn too. So we rolled up after the gig, and we get there. And we, you know, and somebody saw Big Hank, you know, Sugar Hill Gang. Oh, y'all those boys? Oh, y'all got that hip hop song? He said, yeah. He said, oh, yeah, well, Dr. Funkenstein is here. I'm like, Dr. Funkenstein is not in this, he cannot be in this hotel because, you know, that hotel was a bit hooked up. She's like, no. I said, for real? I said, yeah. She said, I said, you gonna give him a call. So she called him up, and George was staying at the hotel.
Uh-huh.
What's up, Doug? How you doing, man? I said, all right, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you. I couldn't, you know, yeah. I said, no, man, it's cool. Tomorrow, come by the room. So I went by the room, and George had, he had the layouts of the Brides of Funkenstein's album cover. They were still doing the artwork. So just
Okay.
kind of like what was to be the album and everything. Looking around, I'm like, yeah, Doug, man, you know, I'm really digging what y'all are doing. So that's how George and I kind of had a brief moment. You know, all it takes is a spark sometimes. It doesn't
Yeah.
take a whole, you know, this, that, and the other. It's like either you hit it off or you don't. But she took a shine into me, and of course I was, you know, I'm like freaking, you know, I was thankful to be on that tour. Now, if you have no idea, that's honestly to this day, hands down, that's the funkiest shit I've ever heard in my life.
That's
Period.
dope.
Dennis, Skeet, friggin' your pops,
Yeah.
Bernie. I used to watch the whole gig right next to Bernie. He had this little Uncle B would have like a little steel, you know, container with his beverages in it and stuff, and you know, I was crazy. But you know, it's like 19 microphones across the stage. Felipe wins out there. It
Oh
was
man.
Macio's, you know, it was insane, and they were in ninja mode at that time. I didn't,
Yeah.
and Junie wasn't on that tour. I just missed him from when Junie was out. But you know, but they were like, y'all should have heard it even when Junie was
Yeah.
here. But I'm thankful to have heard what I did. But your father,
Yeah, he was in his prime at that moment.
he was bruh,
He
bruh,
was in his prime.
bruh. Gaz was no joke, man. Gary would he'd be laying in. And
Man.
it was a circus, man. It was a beautiful, functioning circus of just like of just of beauty
Just good
and
vibes.
just like characters.
Yeah,
Every
just
night was like a new live movie that was going on, concert. And I was just like, man. And Skeet and Dennis were so tight. Oh, Jesus.
yeah, the Baltimore boys, man, they had it down. So look, I just had Dennis on my show a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago, and he told this whole story about Felipe and he was going through this thing with the sound effect guys. He told
Yeah.
a real good story, man. If you might want to check that out, I got a whole bunch of comments after the show about how hilarious just this story in itself was. But Dennis told some good stories from that tour. You know what I'm saying? You might have been at
Yeah.
some of those shows, man. You might want to check it out because Dennis was good, man.
Well, Dennis was, I mean, That whole Baltimore connection just took things to a whole other level because now you got these young lions in there that can play anything and all the Skeet's arrangements and how
Yeah,
tight that was with
man.
Maceo. And it was fearless. I had never seen anything that tight and funky in my life. And even to this day, I tell people that all the time. I don't care. That's the funkiest band I've ever heard in my life.
You
Period.
you know,
You can run credits on that.
I've been telling this story to anyone who I could get a chance to, that wants to talk about it. But essentially, I tell folks like, my dad was very humble, right? Very humble dude. To the point where, like when we were home, he was not like home playing P Funk music, like this is what I did and this is, he was not that dude. So, like in those days, I used to be around, but I was a young type, I mean, not really aware of the magnitude of what was really going on around me, right? So
Mm,
musically, I was very much in tune because when I was born, my dad was, like you said, he was in his prime, as far as what he was doing on stage, and I keyed into that. That was, like my first inspiration was noticing that. It's like, damn, my dad to get up here and say yeah, and all these people are like, yeah, that was a, inspiration for me day one, right? Um, but with that said, by that time they had were doing a set that they pretty much locked into and started doing for like the next 10 and 20 years after that, right? The core of the set. And since dad didn't really play his music, at home, my knowledge of the whole catalog at that until I was a teenager was it was, as far as I knew, everything that I had ever heard them do on stage was the extent of the catalog, and it existed amongst maybe 4 or 5 total albums that I saw at my house, because he
mm,
didn't have all the records, he didn't play it. So I discovered this music as a teenager, as a fan, like most folks did. I had to buy the records from the record store like everybody else did. But it started when the Westbound stuff was released on CD. We got a shipment of all the albums that were on Westbound on CD, and I
mm-hmm.
I spent one night, one afternoon, just got home from school, saw this box, and I just started listening through the CDs, and I was listening, and I just went on, and I was listening, and next thing you know, it was time for me to go to school again. I had sat in front of the radio and played those CDs from the time I got home from school till it was time for me to go back to school. You know what I'm
Mm,
saying? So that kind of really piqued my interest to want to get the entire thing. So I started just going out buying anything that I saw in the record store that had Parliament or Funkadelic on it that I didn't own. And I started listening. So I said all of that to say what you just said about Skeet and Dennis's era of P Funk, specifically when Skeet and the Baltimore Boys got there. I agree with you. I've listened to that stuff then, I've listened to it now. And still to this day, that stuff is the most uniquely funky and uniquely beautiful shit that I have ever heard in my life, man. Like for me, Skeet is like the best I have ever heard play some shit, man, because of the
me
stuff that
too.
he does melodically, man, and his tone. Like I've never heard anything like that shit, man. And still, when I go back and listen to that shit, I'm still just as amazed, like I have just heard it for the first time. Like, man, this is some of the most amazing shit. It's like, what is going through your head, man, when you're thinking of melodies like this, man? Like, this is sheer genius, man. Like, so I agree with you on that, man. That era of the P Funk, when they got, when they entered the band, especially when Junie was there too, that's when the band was at its peak.
That's what I heard too. Dennis used to tell me, man, yo, this is killer. Should have heard it last year when Junie was here. And then he would
Man,
send me tapes. I'm really happy we're talking about Dennis and Skeet because especially Skeet, Skeet is to this day one of my biggest inspirations ever.
I could imagine.
Um, the groove that he did that I heard changed my whole character of playing bass. You know what I mean? Because when you hear somebody that's bringing genius to a performance and controlling and understanding what to play and what not to play, the shape of the note, how to play with a drummer, timbali player, horns, and hit. People don't realize to
They
this
don't.
day how great a bass player Skeet is. And people can go about the greatest and all this other stuff. I don't really look. I always just I look at the era of whatever something's where things are at, because
Okay.
great to me is about is about the person. Great to me is about how as a player is about how that person's character is able to come out and affect me personally. I mean, everything's going to affect everybody a little bit different, but how does it affect me?
I dig
And
it.
as a fellow bassist, when you hear it, and when you're in this world of many bass players and many musicians, Skeet has and always will be one of my number one inspirations ever. And to this day, I will say it again, good people, listen. Dennis Chambers and Skeet is the funkiest stuff I ever heard in my life. How's that
Man,
for clarity? And I'm not, and it's not, it's just because of the, when you feel some stuff, you get goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps just
yeah.
thinking about it right
Man,
now.
I've been there.
And it's like that unit people may not know, because things kind of, time moves on. But you know what? If you don't know, you really need to know. Go back and check out what was going on then. And Skeet was doing those arrangements. That was Skeet. A
Wow.
lot of that stuff was Skeet. Every time I would be
Wow.
like, man, how do you know who's doing this? Oh, so Dennis is like, no, that's all Skeet stuff. Matter of fact, these are things that some of the stuff that we used to do back in the day. And if I'm right, was it Grady that got Skeet and them involved?
I'm
Who was
not
the connector?
I'm not
Who
sure.
when people used to ride the motorcycle?
That could have been Ray or Grady. I think
Yeah,
all the parliaments were like
yeah,
motorcycle
they're all
cats.
bikes. But I think when I talked to somebody, and I didn't realize that. I thought it might have been Mudbone. You know what I mean, or whatever. Maybe
I think it was Mudbone too, because Mudbone is from Baltimore.
he's from Baltimore. But I remember reading something where I was like, oh, okay. I always thought it was Mudbone, but I think Grady had something to do with it as well. But regardless, Mudbone, Grady, God bless both of y'all for making that happen, because I followed that band. I was like, George was like, and all of that group is like, just look at it like this. They're like black African Indians just paving their way through through the world and all along. And by the time I got with them heard them in 1970, it was like, oh, this is the most amazing stuff I've ever heard.
Yeah.
You hear records and there's cussing on, and I have to turn the record player down in my house, and my mom and them wouldn't hear it. But the migration of that band and how it was able to sustain, itself through the years when, let's say, James Brown is hot at that time, and Sly's still doing his thing. And P-Funk just found a way to kind of like just collectively, like when Funkadelic came out, you had a certain rock vibe, you had a rock vibe going on, and that was kind of like what got everything going from, like, I'd say from like maybe 70 to 74. And
Hmm.
then like around the 74s, when that other transition, when Parliament came out with Chocolate City, that was like the icing on the cake, because Funkadelic had already been out rocking, Standing on the Verge, and all the records, and then when your Pops and Boogie was up in Canada,
Canada, yeah.
when they went up there, and that whole transition, they're at Marta Studios or whatever. I can't remember the name of the studio up there, but Draft Dodging going up there. That was a whole other era, because I think, to me, being out of America and being in other places is healthy for anybody that lives in this country. If
I
you really
think
want to
so too.
understand what's going on in this country, leave it and
Yeah.
then go someplace else and don't vacation, stay there. I did
Yeah.
that. I went to London to change my whole vibe, but I think that transition enabled us to be able to get, you know, America Eats Its Young. You know what I'm saying? And that was a double album, right? If I
Yes.
remember right. And then
That
that
was a
was when we
double album.
started to hear the pure genius of Bernie Worrell with A Joyful Process and all the
Mm-hmm.
string arrangements and everything. So I was, I was deep in. And then, just the way the album covers looked and everything like that. It's just everybody was on point, So if y'all don't know, check it out. But as it migrated forward, and by the time I got to have an opportunity to see it firsthand every day, that was 1979. So I'm 9 years in on my Funkadelic journey, and Bootsy and all those that came with that came to. So, but now back to Skeet and Dennis. The energy that they brought to that music was something, and plus they started speeding some stuff up too a little bit, so you
Yeah.
could actually play everything, because a lot of the grooves were slow, and I don't think people realize, you know what I mean, if you're doing a show, sometimes you gotta speed it
Yeah.
up a little bit to be able to get through the repertoire. You know what I mean? And
Unless you play with George, and George is gonna slow it down more.
so I'm quite sure there's this push pull thing of what's going on, because funk is funk. But again, I'm stuck on Skeet and Dennis, man. They need. There should be a statue of those boys, of that whole Baltimore connection, in Baltimore. The whole band, all of them.
That was a transcended era of P Funk, like you just talked about the beginning, where it kind of funkadelic and it got the rock, and then the by 75 the Chocolate City and the Mothership stuff come in, and they started like really putting it on the one and the funk. But by the time Skeet and them got there, and the Baltimore guys got there in '78, and Junie, that's when it became just transcendent. That's when it just, it transcended to just a whole other world. You know what I mean? So, yeah,
Yeah.
and shout out to all my unks that we just talked about, man. Skeet Curtis, man, Rodney Skeet Curtis, much love.
Mm.
Dennis was just on the
Love you,
show.
brothers.
Junie, all the cats. Much love to the OGs, man, who paved the way, man.
I want to just chime in one thing. There's a connection that's happening. My elders that I met here in Connecticut, they were in 1973. They were transplants from Ohio. So
Okay.
Skip McDonald, the late great Otis Stokes, and and his brother is from Lakeside. Otis Stokes and Platypus and all these other iconic Ohio bands. Skip and Otis Stokes were from a band called the Ohio Hustlers, and they were the protege band of the Ohio Players.
Okay.
So so when I was coming up, they knew them firsthand. So when the Players got hit off, we would go see them and hang out with Satch and the whole band. So that was the first band that I got a chance to really know and hang out with, because Skip and them played with them. And
Okay.
back to Junie, back in those days in Ohio, I would hear all the stories about what's going on in Dayton. And Skip, everybody would be in drum corps. You know what I mean? There would be a marching band. A lot of cats grew up. The musicians came from playing in school, but
Okay.
they had their bands, but they also played in a school band. You know what I mean? A marching band or whatever. So
Uh-huh.
Skip, the guitar player who trained me up, I guess there was a drum group that was happening, and Skip used to teach the rudiments of doing the flams and everything, and he was teaching Junie.
Oh
Junie was
wow.
under him.
Oh
So
wow.
even though Junie, everybody might have been playing, Skip was a guitar player, but you're like, yo, man, let's all get, So there was always a bit of a tie line. Now, my other elder, Harold Sargent,
Uh-huh.
is from Cincinnati, and Harold and Phelps were tight. They
Okay.
were, Catfish was tight, and Harold remembers Bootsy before he started playing bass, because Phelps was a bass player, and
Mm-hmm.
Phelps could play, was a killer bass player. Cats don't know, you know now. He
Oh,
was on
Phelps
some
was a
Wimbish and
G.
stuff, and he used to, and Bootsy would sneak and borrow his brother's bass, right? And then Catfish would get pissed off and slap him up a little bit. And Harold would be like, "Oh, no, man, you can't do that, man. You better let that boy play some bass. You want to have a bass." So Harold is one of these guys that got me in the business. Harold Sargent, that's how I met Skip.
Okay.
He's still around. He's one of these old sages that, was in the Navy, always looking after guys, real man's man, and always had an eye for, oh, that dude's good, but he would tell me all these stories about what was going on. So it was almost like I was there. And then when P-Funk would come to town, Harold would be with Phelps the whole time. He'd just hang out with him they just nest up here. They were mates like that. So Harold tells me he was one of Bootsy's first band.
Wow.
And I forgot the name of it, but all being said and done. So there was this, okay, I was checking out Funkadelic, and then I meet some elders from Ohio, and then I started realizing these other tie lines between, because now Bootsy's out, and Harold's like, oh, well, me and Phelps are boys, and I remember Bootsy when I know Bootsy, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, really? Now Bootsy hotter than a firecracker at that time. So I'm
Right.
like, this is crazy. So Ohio players, the whole Dayton, Ohio connection.
Uh-huh.
Talk about that's the land of funk,
Uh-huh.
for real. And then the Cincinnati connection, James Brown and all that's so on and so forth. So now, I go to Ohio, Living Color, Bootsy invited us to his crib, and, life is beautiful.
Uh-huh.
Just having
I
a good, so
bet.
there's always been this, I guess, blessing that has taken place over my time of coming into the world of P-Funk as my all-time favorite band, because there was just so many elements of people that were all individual characters and geniuses, like Bernie. I mean,
Yeah.
I can go on and on. We might have to do this in a couple of parts, but once you skim through it, it's like the wealth that's taken place from what was in that that's what's in that creation. That George and all those that were with George, from the barbershop and this and Plainfield and this, and everybody that's been in that organization
It's
through
all
it
a part.
individually or collectively has helped change how we hear music to this day. All you got to do is go to
That's
what
right.
you sampled and see how many songs Flashlight is sampled on.
That's
See how
right.
many songs just take any song. You could tell, you Knee Deep. You could take,
Atomic Dog and Knee
Atomic
Deep,
Dog,
probably the
and go
most
on and
sampled
on.
songs in the world.
And what are you going to say to that? And I've always found a way to to be in some sort of orbit with somebody from that. And Bernie and Will Calhoun, we all work on
Yeah.
Most Def and so forth.
Yeah. That's all I was about to say. Most deaf. Yeah. So you
Yep.
know what? So I check it out. We got about a good 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
So we talked about the P Funk the whole podcast. I'm gonna give you some time. I want you to talk about yourself a little bit, man. I know you're a humble guy, but this is what I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna leave you with this one, and we can't do this again, man. You come on here anytime, man. We can chop it up because that's what I like to do on here, man. We just come on here and just chop
I
it up.
got you, nephew. I got you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, all right. So, of all the wonderful acts that you have played with, which one, Garrett Shider excluded from that? Because we already know that's probably like the most amazing thing that you have ever done in your
That
life. So,
record is off the chain, man.
I
I want
already
to talk about that.
we'll talk about that next time. Y'all check out Doug on my last album. Those of you who are watching, thefunkstar.com. So, of all those acts, though, like which one has been like the most rewarding, the one that you hold like the most sacred, has been like the one that, you know what I mean, of all the gigs that you've done, the one that's like always going to be like,
Oh, that's easy. So what that, the one that really, to answer that question, it's I have to answer it the in personnel. Skip McDonald,
okay.
Keith LeBlanc, Adrian Sherwood, Bernard Fowler, Tackhead. Tackhead has been one of the most amazing groups that I'm thankful to be a part of. But it's not like a group; it's the individuals, because
Got you.
everybody individually is in their own orbit and is in their own galaxy in a sense. So, and the reason why I'm saying that is because through Tackhead, or through, let's just say, Skip McDonald and Keith LeBlanc, and what we've managed to achieve to be, being that the first band to take hip hop to to the world ever. At one point, we were in Philadelphia, and Kenny Gamble came to the gig, and he was like, I don't know if you boys realize it, but right now, you guys, your trio are on more turntables on earth than any other rhythm section, because all the Sugar Hill records were out, and on one side it would be the rap version, and on the other side was the instrumental version.
Instrumental.
So all these folks learned to rap. And then we were the first one to bring hip hop to the world. Fact. First rhythm section to be able to do that. And then we cut all the Sugar Hill stuff, and then fast forward with that same rhythm section where, Keith does Malcolm X No Sellout, and next thing you know, we're doing Tommy Boy records, and then we were doing Africa Bambaataa. Then fast forward, boom, then we're over in the UK with Adrian Sherwood. And then I'm working with, all of the reggae artists that Adrian's hooked up with On You Sound, and then also working with other labels, which was like Mute Records. We were doing Depeche Mode, and so we had this duality, this other, not necessarily identity, but just another extension of of how we had taken this journey and how we had grown over the years to be able to adapt to different styles, different rhythms, and everything that we took in, like from being out with P-Funk. There's knowledge you take. You take that knowledge, and it goes with you for a lifetime. You can't. This is like, you can't get this in school.
That's
You
right.
can get certain things, but it's also understanding how to walk between the sonic raindrops, how to
Yeah.
be in a room and understand how to deal with the frequencies, how to
Yeah.
deal with, and also be in a situation where we're a multiracial group. Keith is white. People don't know the drummer in all the Sugar Hill Gang stuff is white.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so there's this history of all the stuff that we did at Sugar Hill, cutting for the Crash Crew, Funky 4+1, Sequence, Treacherous 3. Philippe Wynn, we did his record. We played with Jack McDuff, Candy Staten. We were doing chess catalog stuff. So it was endless amounts of recording that we did. Now we're in the UK, and then we were able to take the knowledge that we had from making records in America. Plus, we did the Sun City record with everybody on it, Miles Davis. And so we did a lot of great recordings, but we were never waving the flag. We were like, we're trying to survive, man.
Yeah.
We're trying to just, we're trying to make music, but we're not getting drunk on things that we saw other people get drunk on. We were like,
Yeah.
okay, that's cool. Can we pay our rent? We had a crib on 14th and 6th Street, man, in the height of all the madness. So you try to survive, go to UK. Then we had the opportunity to take the knowledge that we have with a mixologist like Adrian Sherwood, who's just, took it to a whole other level. And it also gave us the opportunity to form our own record label, do things ourselves, just take it to another vibes. And we're still together to this day. To me, that's the sign of a true champagne. We managed to
Yeah.
influence folks like 9 Inch Nails. Look on the first album cover that was on TVT, Pretty Hate Machine. Trent used to follow us around the studio to try to pick our brains and see what we were doing. Adrian would go, man, let's get this guy out of here. And shit, you know what I mean? But if you look at that first album cover as one example, Who's the Stuff remixed by Adrian Sherwood and Keith LeBlanc. So it's more than the notes that we played. It's the business that we did. It's the other styles that we helped create industrial. That whole, we're one of the first bands to ever use samples. We were sampling with AMS machines, instead of, there were no samplers. You found a way to make stuff happen. So the creativity that came from this unit. And then when we met Bernard Fowler, that rounded it all off. So to me, I look at it as a unit. And again, I was making, there's so many other bands that I work with. I'm blessed to work with Living Color. I was making records for 17 years before I played a note with Living Color.
Right.
And so to balance things up a little bit, you know, I just look at, I'm thankful for the unit and my friends that I was able to you know, create new categories, all the drum and bass, all this raggatone stuff. That was our Tackhead boys doing all that stuff in London, in North London. That's all our North London boys, and that was like 19. That was, man, it's ages ago, like 1987, 86, 87. So we were not to wave a flag, but it's just a fact, you
Pe-
know, and that's it. That's
People
it.
have no idea how much you've influenced music or how much influence you've had on a lot of this music that they listen to, man. You know, that's why I tell people all the time, I'm like, man, Doug Wimbish is deep in the streets, boy. Y'all have no idea.
Well,
He's
you know
deep in the
what? Thanks
streets.
to your dad, thanks to my elders. Y'all listen up good. Thanks to the elders. Give them some love. I'm here because they paved the road for me. And
Oh
I
man.
listened and learned. And I managed to take that knowledge and find a way to help share that knowledge with this, like, you're my nephew, man. I love what you
I was
doing.
just about to say, and you,
and,
in turn, you
you
thank
know,
you for
living
passing
color
it on.
is passing it on. But I'm also working with like my new nephews, Daru Jones and Marcus Machado from DMD,
I've
and
done some
Jermaine
work with Daru. I
Holmberg.
jam with Daru.
Yeah, Daru's dope, man. Y'all know y'all are doing some stuff. So, you know, I'm thankful to be able to have, how can I say it? Just good roots, man. You know, and good family. My missus keeps me nice, tight, and you know, and just try to stay healthy and get creative during this. It's not a lockdown. I look at this as freedom, man. It's all time for you to be able to really get into what you need to, what you should have been doing all along.
That's what I did. I said, "Hey, man, like, you know what? I've been talking about doing a podcast. I might as well do a podcast. I can't do no shows. Might
Nephew,
as well,
you're doing a great job too. I've been following you, man. So gold star on the forehead with a
man."
bird's eye and 12-4 time. How's that?
Man, highest honor, man. I appreciate you so much, man. And Doug, man, I thank you so much, man, for being on. Again, bro, you welcome to come on anytime, man. I'm sure I'll be reaching out to you again, man. If you're not doing anything, you come on here. We can chop it up some more. Next time we can talk a little more about you, man. All we did was talk
Um,
about P Funk. We didn't get a chance to even get into Doug Wimbish because, like I said, y'all, Doug is deep in the streets. Y'all just have no idea, man. I'm telling you, y'all. If those of you guys who only know of Living Color, y'all got to go do your research, man. Because I'm telling you, Doug is deep.
well,
That's
you
my
know
unk
what,
right there.
man? I just want to. Everybody got a little light under the sun, man. And right now, you do your podcast, and you keep that light on, man. Make sure you do. My vibe for you, nephew, is give some love to the next generation that's coming up.
Oh,
Uncle Dougie
indeed,
will be on, you know what I'm saying? But I'm
indeed.
not. I don't need. I'm good. You know what I mean? I'm always going to be there for you, but I always want to make sure that we give this generation right now, the class of 2020, or however you want to deal with the blackout community, however you want to please give them some love and find those that are going to be able to carry that torch like you.
Yeah.
You carrying that torch, man. And I'll leave you with this. Y'all check this out. Don't get it twisted. Garrett's record. If y'all haven't heard his latest record, y'all are truly missing something. That shit is, yo. And I'm not saying it, nephew, because you know I love you. But the work you put in, and I'm glad Petra reached out to me, man, to be able to make that happen. Got to give her some love. But that work on that record and your voice, that's some of the funky stuff I've heard in ages, and it's in the right direction. To me, the person that's going to keep that torch alive. You are the
I
heir of P Funk, in my opinion.
Man, I
Period.
appreciate it, man. I'm like speechless hearing you say that, man. I'm so honored to get that from you. I appreciate it, man. I'm gonna keep doing my part, man. And speaking of, man, let's get Brandon on here, man. I'd love to get him on here. Speaking to the next generation, man. You know, like 'cause that's exactly what I want to do. I got to get my follower game up though, because the youngsters, man, you know how they are on this social media and shit. They be looking at your followers. They be like, nah, you ain't got enough followers there, OG.
Pay that no attention, man. Look, we could do some really creative things, man, if you don't mind. It would be good to get Brandon and Raghav. Appreciate you coming to Chuck's and that when we were down there in what was it, DC area,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and
I'm always come through and support the fam, man.
yeah, and maybe we'll chop it up and just see if we can maybe do a couple of hybrids between the elders and the next generation. That's always good to be able to just, you know, keep those frequencies there, man. Because we learn from the youngsters, they learn from us. It's so important that we pass this information down, or it gets distorted, rewritten wrong in all music or whatever. You know, if you're there live, then that's real. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And if you have these, there's not stories, it's biblical stuff that's going on. There's some of the stuff that I'm talking about right now. To me, is it inspired me so much. I know it inspired you, and it's something that we need to be able to share so that it's documented. You know what I mean? I
Yes.
love to come on with the nephews. I love to come on with some of my Sugar Hill boys. Maybe bring Keith and Skip.
Yes.
Let's make it happen at some time. But for the most part, my oxygen is, I've taken my breath. I've taken up enough of your time, my nephew, and I love
You can never take too much of my time.
you.
I tell you what, man, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go though. We're gonna do this again. Again, you guys, we are on here with Doug Wimbish, deep in the streets. Go do your research, man. That's my unc. Much love to you, man. And before you get out of here, let me get a drop from you, man. Let them know you listening to you are tuned into the Starchild Jr. Stuffs and Things podcast.
Good people, you are tuned into the Star Child Stuffs and Things
The
podcast.
Starchild Jr. Stuffs and Things
Oh,
podcast.
ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Star Child Junior Stuffs and Things podcast. And things and stuff things.
All day, all day. Hey, man, thanks a lot, Doug, man. You have you a wonderful evening, man, and we'll talk again soon, man. Hit me up, man. Let's do some
All
work.
right, brother. Good people. Peace out.
Much love.
Much love, brother.